This is fastly becoming one of my very favorite places to come. I love Escanaba. I am a Youper. I don't know that some of you know that. I actually grew up in Manistee, graduated high school there. That's where I started my relationship with God. So I is one of you. That's what I is. I just want to start out sharing just a little bit about what we do and what you support. We are blessed to partner with to partner with Convoy of Hope as a U.S. missionary. Every year I get to make sure that we help resource rural communities, rural churches with product, with ideas on outreach. I love that. Every time I hear a story about somebody who found Christ because of the relationships that were built outside the four walls of the building, I go, yes, this is so worth it. A couple other pieces that we get to do. I am married to Rochelle. We've been doing life for 40 years. You know, I didn't even mention this morning. We're brand new grandparents. And so that's pretty cool. But she's the marriage therapist person. And one of the things that we said is, you can deal with a lot of the poverty issues that really are real issues in a lot of rural communities. But if we don't take care of relationship issues as well, you're just basically giving out a meal, but not really going after the heart. And when we started, we actually went to Focus on the Family, where Rochelle was working, and she is helping people who are in crisis. And we said, the materials that you teach in crisis, can we use those in an enrichment environment? They said yes. They wrote off. They had their lawyer sign it off. And so we are doing our very best to help people in rural communities have better, greater relationships, whether that's in marriage, whether it's just doing life alone, or life as a single person. Because I do know this, that just because you're single, you're not broken. You are not broken. And God can use you in great ways and will use you in great ways. But this last year, we've gotten to have close to 700, 800 couples who we've gotten to invest in and love on because of your generosity. But the other piece that we've went after is, we heard the statistic out there that there are 1,800 ministers leaving the ministry every single year across the United States. And we said we got to put a dent in that. We started to create some events for pastors. We just basically bring them together. They share a common fun thing that we do together, whether it's playing golf for a couple of days together or fishing together. Like to do mountain climbing, love to do some of that here in the future. We actually have somebody who came forward and said, I want to support those. Next year, we're going to get to have about 120 pastors come to these events, invest in them, say, take off the mask, what's going on. One of those pastors that came this year, we did a fishing event in Marinette, Wisconsin, just right down the road, about an hour from here, and brought in 19 pastors during meet and greet. Pastors just came ready to share. One of I just wanted it to be simple, but they were hurting so bad, some of our pastors. And by the way, a good friend of mine, John Opalewski, in his 12,000 hours of direct contact with pastors, he found that pastors are struggling in these three. The pastors he was dealing with struggle in one of these three ways. Top three. One is burnout. How many pastors just are feeling stressed? And you can go into all the reasons for that. Second thing that they're dealing with is marriage issues. And pastors' wives, I've said this for years. I believe that when we get to heaven, I have no way of proving this, just sounds right. So Monica, this is what I believe, is that when we get to heaven, there's going to be two sets of people that will have eternal combat pay forever and ever. One will be pastors' wives, because you have to live with the pastor, and the second people will be anyone who works in that nursery. So I'm just saying that's but the third thing that pastors are dealing with is addictions, whether it be porn issues or drugs, alcohol. addictions. So with that thought in mind, show up on a Sunday night. These pastors did. It was just supposed to be nice. Let's just hear. And it got serious quickly. As about the third person in said, my name is, I've pastored here for 20 plus years. And to be honest, church is doing great. I'm doing horrible. My marriage is on the rocks. Second pastor, about the fourth pastor, I should say, went, and same story, been here, God's doing great things. I mean, but to be honest, my home is a struggle. 2 weeks ago, we were in the ER with my oldest son who had just overdosed. And these stories went on and on as we just listened. What's so cool is throughout the year after that event in June, we've just kept that relationship alive, and pastors have called me and said, I have no one to talk to, and here it is. And we've been able to pray and love and care. And I'm just telling you this story because you made that possible. You are keeping pastors in the game. And I just want to say thank you for that. One of those testimonies came from Pastor Mark, who said this: I'm deeply grateful for putting together that event in June. Most people are not aware of how lonely ministry can be. It's too easy to become isolated, feel like there's no one to talk to about personal or ministry challenges. And as a result, many of us bottle up all that frustration, hurt, and loneliness. And that's exactly where I was at. During the retreat, God allowed me to connect with some incredible pastors who had walked the same walk I had. I could talk about things I hadn't discussed with anyone before because it never felt safe. There was something intangible but very real and safe about being on a boat fishing side by side with another pastor from an area completely unconnected to my own that allowed me to talk about things heavy on my heart. The camaraderie, emotional, and spiritual replenishment during the retreat filled me up in a way that few things ever have. Thank you. Because of the effort and generous gifts that made the retreat possible, I not only feel capable of continuing to walk the difficult path of ministry, but I also know I have a group of guys I can call on anytime, and I didn't have that before. And Pastor Mark wants to say to you, thank you. Thank you. So thank you so much for partnering with us, not only financially, but in prayer. And I also want you to know that this is a reciprocal relationship, because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. As a missionary, every single month, or 5 days a week, I should say, we get missionaries get what we call our dailies. And what it is we get an email saying who donated the day before. And for every one of those, for me personally, I'll just tell you that when I see New Life Assembly of God show up and your donation, your support, I pray for you. I pray God's favor on you personally, that God would be a blessing to you, that you would discover God in a new way, that your family would thrive and grow, that you would discover things about yourself, about God. I just pray for favor financially and health and everything. That's what I pray for you. So just know this, that once a month you're getting a prayer from Springfield, Missouri, saying, God, just bless our friends. Now, this is another part of the secret. For those who don't support us, no prayer for them. I am really just teasing about that. How many of you, this is the Grinch that stole Christmas. I want to get into this message. How many of you have ever known a Grinch? You've known a Grinch. How many of you are related to a Grinch? Do I even want to ask how many of you are married to? No, I will not ask that. Hands did go up. Wow. And but I want to just open up telling you about a story about a Grinch. And I will tell you straight up, when I first met this Grinch, I was not prepared for it. I didn't know how to respond to it. I didn't know what to do with it. And I made it about me. I thought it really was about me. When we went to pastor a church in Iowa, we had our very first Sunday. It was August of 1999, so 25 years ago. My wife did not warn me ahead of time. She set me up for something that at the time I was really ticked off about. It was during the announcement time. We didn't have these nice announcements. This was a small rural community, rural church. in a town of about 1,200 people, south central Iowa. And Rochelle had a clipboard in her hand, and we're doing announcements, and she raises her hand and says, can I make one more announcement? What can I say? It's my wife, right? And we're trying to make a good impression here. And she stood up, and she grabs the microphone, and she says, if you're 65 years old or older and would like for Pastor Greg to come this week and visit you for an hour, put your name on the sheet. I'm like, okay. 25 people put their names down on that thing. And I'm like, how come I have to do this? And I'm complaining about it. Well, I actually went and fulfilled my obligation, visited my seniors that week for an hour each, and I honestly discovered some of the greatest people in the whole world. I not only did that month, I did it the next month, and the next month, and the next month, and 11 years later, I can just tell you that my life is richer today than it has ever been because I made connections with some lonely people, with some people who just needed somebody to spend some time with, and I discovered that I had people that were praying for me and loved me, and my older people became my heroes of the faith. One of these people, however, it didn't start out that way. There was a guy by the name of Fred Johnson and his wife, Alberta. Alberta started coming to our church about 3-4 years into our time there in Corridon. And Alberta was just an absolute peach. She was unbelievable, godly woman, married to Fred, who never darkened the doors of our church. But I would go visit. In order to visit Alberta, I had to get through the door past Fred. And Fred was the Grinch. He was a mean guy. By this time in his life, he was in his early 80s, as Alberta was. Alberta walked like every day for like 5 miles. She was the epitome of healthy. She ate well. She's just upbeat. Then you go and meet Fred, and Fred was the opposite. Fred was a couch potato. Fred was that guy that was mean. He was cranky. His meds, if he didn't have them during the day, he would let you know. And he was just a mean guy. But as time went by, each month I'd go visit and just to see Alberta, and Fred would get in on the conversations. Fred started to let his guard down. He started to just kind of be nice, started to look forward to me coming. It was a political season. Don't you love political seasons? I'm glad that the political season is kind of over, right? We can be friends again. And but Fred was he was like the 24/7 news guy. And to be honest, it was like, I don't want to talk about that today, and I just thought I'd shut that down. We talk about something more pleasant. And so all I said one time when I went to visit Fred was, I said, it's easy to be an armchair president. That's all I said. It's easy to know what the president or know what political people should do, but you don't have all the information, right? Kind of like being an armchair coach. You don't have and that's all I said, and I thought I said it very nicely. The next month I went back, and I knock on the door, and Fred sees me. And he goes, oh, no, you are never allowed back here ever again. He had a month to think about it. He said, last time you were here, you called me an armchair president, and and he got all mad and had all of his reasons. Said, don't ever come back. Alberta stopped coming to our church as well. She ended up finding somewhere else by the advice of Fred, from his advice. I felt terrible. Be honest, I didn't know how to handle the Grinch. I didn't know what to do with the Grinch. I thought it was about me, why did I say what I said? What I discovered later was that Fred was a child of an alcoholic, that Fred was a guy that for years had put himself in isolation, had cut off relationships, both with his kids. The only person that could ever get along with him was his wife, Alberta, who was the peach. A couple of years went by. And unbelievable. I don't know why this happens, why God allows this to happen. Wouldn't you know it, Alberta died before him. Like every day it was like, is he going to make it past the day? And he makes it longer than she did. He should have died way before. She did. About a year later, it was this time of year, right before Christmas. I hadn't heard from Fred for a while. I'd been around. I'd seen him. I had waved to him. If I actually saw him, because we did certain things at that facility, and I would say hi to him. I just did my best to just be kind. It was a struggle because he was just Grinchy, and. This time of year, it was probably 15, 16 years ago, I get a phone call. And on the other end of the line is this very weak voice. And he goes, hello, hey, is this Pastor Greg? I was like, yeah. He said, this is Fred. And I'm Fred Johnson? He goes, yeah. And then he went into and said, I just want to ask you something. I said, what's that? He said, I need to ask you for your forgiveness. He said, will you forgive me? I was reading the Bible just like today for the first time in like forever. And I came across the verse that said that if you don't forgive other people, God won't forgive you. And there's nothing that wants to keep me away from ever seeing my wife again. If this is the hurdle I have to jump over to get to see my wife, that's why I'm calling you today. That day, I leapt. I got excited. Redemption. I went over to see Fred, and I led Fred in a sinner's prayer. Fred found Christ. A few months later, Fred went to heaven. He went to heaven. I said he went to heaven. And that's the beauty. Don't ever give up on your Grinches. Don't ever give up on your Grinches. This morning, where I want to go is, I want to talk about, I got to get my stuff up here. I want to talk about how that people do what they do many, many times because of pain in their life. The thing that we don't get from Dr. Seuss's rendition is, why was the Grinch the way he was? We do get a little bit of that from Jim Carrey's rendition of where Cindy Lou, who asks about his past and he had some things, people made fun of him. And then back to Dr. Seuss, it says that he lived in isolation for 53 years. 53 years, which got me to thinking about why people ever choose to live in isolation. We live in an isolated world, don't we? Live in an isolated world where people they don't want to get involved in other, because with it, they run the risk of their own pain and being hurt. Isolation looks different for different people. For some people, it's sitting and becoming the 9 o'clock in the morning alcoholic or the evening alcoholic. For some people, isolation looks like spending hours and hours in front of a TV. For some people, it looks like scrolling through social media. It's weird that you can have all these friends on social media and still be so lonely and feel so isolated, right? For some people, it looks like you spend hours reading, or for some, it's you become a workaholic just so you don't have to experience relationships. Really what it is that you are shutting other people out of your life. Let me just say this, that loneliness looks different than aloneness. I appreciate alone time. I appreciate the time I get to sit with God and download and hear his voice. And I am convinced that it's going to be very difficult for you or I to really hear the voice of God if we don't get alone with him. How many times did we see Jesus in the Bible who left the crowds and he went and found a solitary place so he could hear from God? That's acceptable. What is unacceptable is when we choose isolation over relationship. Isolation over relationship. And this morning I want to give you just a few thoughts about isolation. Number one, you and I, we were never created to be in isolation. We were never intended to do the Grinch lifestyle, where we just isolate ourselves for 53 years. We were intended to do life with people. In the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, and leading up to that, God's created everything in 6 days. 7th day, he took his day off. And then God gave Adam the job of naming all the animals. As he's naming them, here come the elephants, here come the camels, and they all come in 2 by 2. And at some point, Adam goes, wait a minute, how come there's 2 of them and 2 of them, but only one of me? Only one of me. And I kind of think, Rochelle has said this a lot of times, I think it's because God was creating in Adam this desire to not be alone, to recognize his problem. And then God got to answer the problem by creating out of his own rib a woman. And you know why God created woman last, correct? Because he didn't want advice on how to make everything else. Am I right? And my wife would say, well, Rochelle, what is the real reason God created woman last? Yeah, there you go. You choose yours, right? The whole point being the very first problem that God ever saw in his creation was man being alone. You and I were created by God to do life with other people. The enemy, we have an enemy of our soul who wants to separate you from relationship, whether it be relationship with your kids, relationship with your parents, with your brothers, sisters, with people of the church, with people, friends. The enemy wants to create this piece of separation and put a wedge behind you. Let's wise up and go, no matter what, I am going to choose to do relationship, and it's relationship with God. Second thing I want to just point out is that loneliness often feels safe, but it's a lie. Loneliness can feel safe. It can be used as a form of coping with our past. If you get in relationship, know this, that the cost of losing someone is a risk you take in loving someone. It's going to be a risk. Any relationship you walk into, whether it be marriage, whether it be friendship, any relationship is going to be a risk. But it's a risk that you have to take. Having relationship with God can often feel very risky, but it's a relationship that I have been so privileged to have had for almost 50 years. And I thank God every day for my relationship with him because it helps me with my relationship with all of you. Third thing about isolation is this, that it's really can be used as a form of torture. How many of you remember COVID? How many remember that wonderful season? I'm absolutely convinced that the disease of COVID killed less people than isolation and loneliness did. How we put people in this isolated bubble and said you can't have people come visit you, see you, and there people lied in their isolation. And you know, when you're in isolation, the reason it's a form of torture is because your brain has way too much time to think about. And it goes places that you couldn't even dream about. When you're thinking all by yourself and you start down, does it get better or does it get worse? Yeah, it starts out with, I think I don't think anybody even likes me. And then you come up with all the reasons why they don't like you. When you're in isolation, your thoughts rarely go to the positive. They always spiral downhill. This is what I'm saying is there the Grinch sat up on that mountain, Mount Crumpet, for years. And the longer he stood up there, the more he got angry, the more he started finding blame, and he just became an angrier person. Does that describe you? Does that describe you, or do you know someone that describes? Let me just say this then as well about people who are in isolation. For us, I hope that we recognize that we have an opportunity to be a blessing to those who sit in isolation. And I think about our seniors is what I'm really thinking about. Bible says this in James chapter 1, verse 27. It says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: visit the orphans and widows in their affliction and keep oneself unstained from the world. Pure religion. I'm gonna challenge everyone in this building right now that somewhere during this season to do something that I found so beneficial to my own life. Go spend an hour with somebody this holiday season that doesn't have anyone. To that widow, to that person who has just went through a divorce, to that person who just lost a loved one. Go find an hour of your time this season and go sit and say nothing. Ask a question and then just sit back and listen. Love somebody through their time of isolation. You get to be the Cindy Lou to some Grinch that is out there. That's who you get to be. The last piece that I want to say is that for us, how do we not become that Grinch? How do we actually become intentional in this whole thing? And it's really being intentional about being relational. I saw this, I think it was, this is just one reason to be intentional about relationship. How many of you like money? I mean, just be honest, you like money. I mean, I had a friend of mine that actually said he's old enough now, he's like in his 60s. He doesn't get that emotional, that charge when he gets paid and he sees it in his account anymore. I'm like, yeah, I'm not there. I am not there. But I saw, it was actually, I believe Dave Ramsey that said this about friendship. He said, if you took your 10 closest friends and averaged out their salaries, that your salary would be 10% more or less of that number. And when I heard that little thing, I said to myself, Greg, you need new friends. You just need new friends. Friendships help you in every way. Friendships help you economically. Friendships help you just to cope with life. Bible goes on and talks about the value of friends, that when we have 2, 3 friends, that we can face many things together. Bible even says this about your relationship with Jesus Christ, that when you have him as your friend, you have a friend that walks through every journey. Through the highs, through the lows, Jesus never leaves you, never forsakes you. He is a friend always. So, few friendship tips. I love Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, because to me, this is a recipe for being a friend. If you want more friends, do Galatians chapter 5, 22, which is the fruit of the Spirit that says, fruit of the Spirit is love. How many think you'd have more friends if you had more love? More friends if you were more even joyful. More friends if you walked in peace rather than walking in fear. More peace. Forbearance is the word it used there. Patience is another word for that. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. You do those things, and I believe that it's really a recipe for being a great friend and helping other people not walk a Grinch life. So let me just go through this real quick, because when we live by the fruit of the Spirit, we attract people to us rather than repel people. A few thoughts about friendship. And this was actually like a life changer to me. I heard Dick Foth say this, one of my favorite motivational type speakers. It just really changed how I do life. When you walk into a room, do you walk into that room and say, here I am? Or do you walk into the room and go, there you are? Because true friends don't go, hey, everybody, I'm your gift of life today. A true friend looks into another human being's life and says, there you are. I found you. It's investing in somebody's life. There's a book called The Go-Giver, great book that I would recommend as well. We have pastors read that all the time. One of the thoughts in that book is this, that we get the opportunity to add more to other people's lives than we take. Add more to other people's lives than we take. So really quickly, 7 things on being a great friend during Christmas. Number 1, go first. Go first. Don't wait for somebody to call you. You go first. You make the relationship. You get on the phone. You write the letter. You go first. A lot of people will sit in just self-pity. How come nobody likes me? How many of you know this? How many of you have ever had a pity party? Anybody here? Pity party? Have you ever noticed this, that when you had your own pity party, you were the only one that showed up to your own party? It was a pretty lonely party, right? And so this is the way to do it. Some of you, you're going to have to go, well, this is out of my own, lifestyle. This is out of my own comfort zone. That's what I'm looking for. And you're going to have to get on the phone. You're going to have to find somebody. Go talk to a neighbor. Go first. Second thing, be reciprocal. Sometimes you listen. Sometimes you share. The piece of being a great friend is that it is not a one-sided relationship, because one-sided relationships don't last long. We have a name for one-sided relationships. It's called, you go to your therapist, right? You go to your psychologist. That's where you go. Friendship means that we add and we take, that we give and we take. That's what friendship looks like. Third thing is to be kind, just to be nice to people. You will have more friends if you learn to be kind and say kind things to them, right? You'll have more friends that way. I mentioned this in the first service that, and I chuckled about it because it came to my mind about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, where I was reminded of a friend I had in college. Carlos was his name, Carlos Moody. He was an African-American guy, and Carlos always had, like, these girls around him. Like, they were just attracted to him. My friend, my roommate and I went up to Carlos and said, Carlos, like, what is your secret for having all these, like, let us in on this secret? And Carlos, who was like one of the most modest people you'll ever meet, just a funny guy, nice guy, he says, well, I'm just kind to him. I'm just nice to the girls. And my roommate and I looked at each other and said, why didn't we think of that? That's a new one. Didn't have to have some line to pick up. Wow, just be nice. What a concept. Be kind. It is your relational currency. It's that reaping and sowing, that when you plant good seeds, you reap good seeds off of that. Be kind. Fourth thing that you can do to have better friends and to be relational and not feel isolated is to be an intentional listener. Be intentional. I'm really interested in you. I'm really interested in you. I wish I could say that I've always been good at this. This is one of those pieces that as a child of God, that God has me on this journey of just being a better listener. And I've learned that making eye-to-eye contact is a huge piece. How many people that you walk around with, they never feel seen? There was a person that when I was youth pastoring, her name was Misty. And Misty actually reminded me of this story. I had kind of forgotten about it. But Misty has been serving God or walking with God for some time now, since she was a young teenager. She did not come from a Christian background. Misty came to our youth group back in the mid-'90s, and by the invitation of a kid named Tom. Tom invited her. We were doing this like promotional thing, invite somebody, and Tom went to Misty and said, you want to go with me? Misty came. She came to youth group. It was not like her flavor. She had grown up in a very traditional church. This one had some life to it. She didn't know how to deal with any of that. And she really didn't want to know God, that kind of thing. And she had made the determination she was never, ever coming back to youth group ever again. She tried it. She's done with it. She's good. That week, there was a suicide in the school where she was going to school at. I happened to go to that funeral, and when I was there, I was just mingling with some other teenagers and people, and walking that journey with some of the teenagers, and I spotted Misty, and I went up and said, "Hey, Misty, how are you doing?" And Misty, shocked, put out her hand that I had offered mine, and she said, it's been kind of rough. The next week, Misty came back to youth group, and the next week, Misty found Jesus. And Misty started walking the journey. She went off to Bible college. We're 30 years later, and I see Misty at a Fun Marriage Workshop event, and Misty says, do you know why I'm even here? Why I even have a relationship with God? I said, well, she said, and this is what she said. She said, I was prepared to never come back to church. I didn't want anything to do with God. God had always been a hurtful piece to me. And when I went to that funeral, she said, do you remember? I said, yeah. She said, you came up to me and you called me by my name. You saw me. You looked in my face, and I'd never had an adult ever do that before. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. And it created this piece of trust. She said, and I'm serving God today because you remembered my name. You remembered my name. Listen to people. Listen to their stories. Take the time to listen. To the person behind the counter, I love this about my wife. She'll be at a place and she'll see somebody, and she always takes the time to hear somebody's story. Fifth thing is be safe, confidential, reliable. Number 6, don't overshare. And don't undershare. Be wise, be transparent. You see, this whole thing called relationship is like playing catch with somebody. You start out with a tennis ball or a baseball or a softball. Don't start lobbing bowling balls too quickly, right? That's what some people do, and they don't know how to do relationship well. Take your time. 7th thing is to be available. Relationships don't just happen by accident. As we conclude this morning, be honest, I was so into this message, I didn't see I'd ran out of time. Good thing it's on the back board back there. But I want to say this, just one last story. I want to talk about your relationship with God. He can be trusted. He will listen to you. He loves you. A few months ago, I flew into an airport. And as fate would have it, it was all late, and I had to still go get a rental car. There was a limo service or a shuttle service that I had to get on, and this place is packed. People are mad, they're angry, they're upset. I get shoved onto this shuttle bus. I'm the last one on. You know the nice part about being the last person on? You're the first person off. We get off, we get into the rental car place, and this guy stands up and he starts shouting to all these angry people, if you just made a reservation an hour ago, no room, no place, you don't get a car. And then he said a few more things, and then he looked down. I'm first one in line. He says, so what is your name, and when did you make your reservation? I said, my name is Greg Colegrove. I made my reservation 4 months ago. He went, your name's right here. Gave me a car, and off I went. And I had the thought, how sad is it going to be come that day when we stand before God of how many people never made the reservation, and there will be no place for them. Today is a day to let Jesus Christ become your best friend, your guide, your everything. You will never be sorry. And on that day, it will be God who calls your name and says, right here.